For 7 years, I was the invisible hand that ran his empire. He never asked what the other hand was building. On the day he destroyed my last thread to dignity, I pressed enter. He was done. The belief wasn't arrogance, not in his mind. It was simple physics, a fundamental law of his universe, as immutable as gravity. Mass, volume, velocity, power. Julian Thorne possessed the latter in quantities that bent the world around him. It insulated him in a silent, temperature-controlled bubble where consequences were a distant rumor, something that happened to other people, in other, lesser buildings. His office, the penthouse eyrie of Thorne Capital, was the cathedral of this belief. Floor-to-ceiling glass showed a glittering city sprawled obediently below, a circuit board of ambition and dependency. Here, he was the architect, the deal-maker, the man who whispered and markets shifted. He moved men and money like pieces on a board, and the pieces never talked back. Ava Silva was a piece. A quiet, elegant, highly functional piece in the background of his life. His executive assistant, a title that barely scraped the surface of her role. For 7 years, she had been the silent engine of his empire. She managed his chaos, predicted his needs, smoothed the human wrinkles he could not be bothered with. She was a fixture, as reliable and unobtrusive as the titanium desk. He knew her competence, relied on it absolutely, but he did not see her, not in a way that mattered. To Julian, she was a beautifully tuned instrument. He never considered she might have a symphony of her own playing in her head. The first crack in the monolith was small, a hairline fracture. A Friday evening. The markets were closed, the sky outside bleeding into a deep, expansive purple. Julian was dismissing her for the week, already mentally in his limousine, heading to a fundraiser where he would be the guest of honor. He tossed a file onto her desk, a merger proposal for a family-owned textile company, the final, aggressive terms. Make sure this is on Ballantyne's desk first thing Monday. No changes. They'll fold by Wednesday. Ava did not pick up the file immediately. She looked at it, then at him. Her calm brown eyes held a stillness that, for a fraction of a second, felt heavier than the usual professional deference. The Ramirez family has owned that mill for 3 generations. Their counterproposal had merit. The pension fund provision alone. Julian had smiled, a thin, condescending stretch of lips. Sentimentality is a liability, Ava, you know that. They're a loose thread. I'm pulling it. He turned to leave, the conversation already erased from his mind. Her voice, unchanged in volume, somehow filled the space he had just vacated. And what happens when you pull the wrong thread, Julian? The whole fabric can unravel. He paused, half-turned, not angry, but amused. The instrument had made an unexpected, quaint sound. My fabric, he said, the pronoun a weapon, is bulletproof. He left then, the snick of the glass door closing behind him like a period at the end of his sentence. The unraveling did not announce itself with thunder. It began with a quiet digital sigh. The following Tuesday, a regulatory inquiry landed not on his desk, but in the headlines. A small, troublesome article in a financial blog citing anonymous but impeccably detailed sources about creative accounting in the Baltic Venture Fund. Julian scoffed, a mosquito buzzing. His legal team, the best money could buy, would swat it. But the mosquito had friends. A second article appeared, then a third, each more precise, each lifting a corner of the veil on transactions he had buried under layers of shell companies and blind trusts. The sources were not just anonymous, they were internal. They spoke the private language of the boardroom. Paranoia, cold and slick, began to coil in his gut. He summoned his inner circle, his CFO, his head of security, his lawyer. They sat in the penthouse, shadows under their eyes from long nights containing fires that kept popping up elsewhere. "It's a coordinated attack," his security chief grunted. "The level of detail, it's not a hack, it's a narrative. Someone is telling a story." "Then find the author!" His fist connected with the titanium desk, a rare public loss of composure. The pieces on his board were looking at each other, not at him. The silence in the room was accusatory. Through it all, Ava was a portrait of steady competence. She managed the frantic schedules, fielded the increasingly tense calls from investors, prepared the briefing documents for damage control. She was his anchor in the growing storm. One evening, as she brought him a coffee, black, 2 sugars, exactly as he liked it, he watched her. Really watched her. She wasn't fraying. While the empire showed cracks, she remained seamless. A strange thought occurred to him. She was the only thing in his environment that wasn't reacting. "You're very calm." His voice was rough from lack of sleep. She met his gaze, her expression one of polite concern. "Panic is inefficient, Mr. Thorne. We focus on solutions." "We." He clung to the pronoun. She was still on his side. Of course she was. Then came the Omega file, a leak so catastrophic it bypassed the media entirely and landed directly in the inboxes of the SEC, the FBI, and 3 major congressional oversight committees. It was a digital tomb containing not just financial sins, but the human cost. Emails mocking the environmental impact reports for the Indonesian pipeline, voice memos casually discussing the suppression of wage-fixing evidence, the encrypted spreadsheet that laid out the systematic illegal poisoning of a township's water supply to depress property values for a land grab. It was the unvarnished, ugly id of Thorne Capital, and it had his fingerprints all over it. The bubble burst. The temperature-controlled silence shattered into a cacophony of ringing phones, screaming lawyers, and the palpable metallic taste of doom. His board staged a mutiny. Assets were frozen. The limousine stopped coming. Standing alone in his penthouse for what he knew was the last time, Julian Thorne felt the new, terrible physics of his existence, the gravity of consequence, finally reaching him. He didn't understand how. He had to understand how. Markov, his face gray, delivered the final blow. The digital forensics, it's impossible to trace perfectly, but the pattern, the access, the intimacy of it didn't come from a server farm in some hostile country. It was compiled from within these walls, over years. Someone with a key to everything, someone you trusted. The pieces, scattered and chaotic, snapped into a horrifying, coherent picture. The quiet questions, the steady gaze, the unshakable calm. The instrument had not been playing his tune at all. It had been recording it, every note. He found her in her office. Her office now, it seemed. A smaller, neat space 1 floor below the penthouse. She was packing a single cardboard box, a potted orchid, a framed photo of an older woman, a few books, as if she were leaving after a typical day. He stood in the doorway, a ghost of his former self, his suit jacket gone, his tie loose. The power he had worn like a second skin had been surgically removed, leaving him raw and trembling. Why? The word was stripped bare, a broken thing. Ava Silva finished placing a book in the box and turned to face him. She didn't smile, she didn't frown, she simply was, calm and intense, her strong eye contact holding him pinned. The faint silhouette of his former power was there in the blur of the hallway behind her, but it was hers now, dismantled and on display. This was the quiet dominance he had never recognized, the suspense finally resolved. "You pulled the wrong thread, Julian," she said, her voice even, a stark contrast to the ruin in his. "The Ramirez well, you remember? You said sentimentality was a liability." He stared, uncomprehending. "That? Over that?" "No," she said, and for the first time he saw the fire that had fueled the quiet, patient years. It wasn't in her voice, which remained controlled, but in the depth of her eyes. It wasn't in her voice, which remained controlled, but in the depth of her eyes. She had control, but she was unshakable. "That was just the thread," she said. "The fabric you unraveled was my father's life. He worked at the Ramirez mill for 42 years. The pension you called a sentimentality was the oxygen tank for my mother's emphysema. When you pulled the thread, you turned off the tank." The world tilted. A petty, forgotten deal. A line item. A loose thread. "You never asked, Julian. You never saw the fabric. You just saw the pattern you wanted to cut it into." She picked up the box. It was light. She had carried the heavy things for years. "You thought you were untouchable because you only touched things, not people. You forgot people have memories. People have daughters." She walked towards him, towards the door. He was blocking it, but he was no longer an obstacle. He was a piece of furniture. She paused, looking not at his eyes, but at the empty space where his influence used to be. "You were done," she said, the two words a final, quiet verdict. "The moment you decided you were the only one who got to tell the story." And she walked past him, down the hall, out of his universe. He stood there in the empty space she left behind, surrounded by the echoing silence of his own fall. The law of his physics had been rewritten. The untouchable had been touched, not by a rival, not by a force of nature, but by the quiet, patient, utterly dominant truth of a woman who had finally spoken. The silence she left behind was a physical substance, thick and cold, filling her lungs like cement. Julian stood in the doorway of her vacant office, staring at the empty chair, the blank desk, the ghostly square on the wall where her diploma had been. The words, "You were done," didn't echo, they embedded. They were not a threat, but a diagnosis, delivered after the autopsy was already complete. His body moved on a delay, a puppet with severed strings. He walked back to the penthouse, the journey an ascent into a tomb. The panoramic view was now a taunt, a kingdom he could see but no longer touch. He poured a drink, his hand steady, a final, futile performance for an audience of none. The amber liquid tasted of nothing. His mind, a supercomputer trained on risk assessment and leveraged buyouts, tried to run the numbers on this. It searched for the lever, the loophole, the counterplay. There was none. This wasn't a hostile takeover with terms to be negotiated. It was a systemic deletion. Ava hadn't just exposed crimes, she had exposed the philosophy behind them. She hadn't leaked data, she had published the translation. She made the cold calculus of profit over people understandable, and in doing so, made it unforgivable. The public, the regulators, the jurors, they would now see the man, not the monument. His phone buzzed, a frantic insect on the titanium. It was his lawyer, Robert. Julian answered on speaker, placing the phone on the desk as if it were contaminated. "Julian, they've moved. It's a RICO indictment, federal. They're naming you personally. The Omega file, they're calling it a blueprint of predatory intent. The DA is holding a press conference in an hour." Robert's voice, usually a smooth instrument of reassurance, was frayed with a panic he couldn't hide. "We need to discuss surrender, a statement. We need to—" "Was she your source, Robert?" Julian interrupted, his voice unnervingly calm. A choked silence. Then, "What? Who?" "Ava. Did she come to you? Feed you questions to avoid? Guide your damage control right into the path of the torpedo?" "Julian, for God's sake, this is not the time for paranoia. We need to—" "It's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition." He ended the call. The pieces kept clicking. Her suggesting Robert specifically for the media training last year. her gentle steering of internal investigations toward dead ends, making the eventual true exposure look even more like a cover-up exploded from within. She hadn't just gathered evidence, she had choreographed the collapse. He opened the secure encrypted server, his personal digital vault, the one Markov set up, air-gapped, a fortress. His last repository of true leverage, the things even the Omega file didn't touch. The compromat on 2 senators, the offshore account details for a certain Justice Department official, the proof of a rival's insider trading, his final cards. The vault was empty. Not hacked, not breached, cleaned. The files were gone, replaced by a single plain text document. Julian, it began. No title, no signature. You believed information was power. It is, but power depends on context. A scalpel in the surgeon's hand heals. In the hand of a murderer, it kills. You collected scalpels to murder reputations, to dissect lives for parts. You never considered that someone might learn anatomy from you. The files that were here are now in a distributed dead man's switch, keyed to several reputable journalistic institutions. If I'm arrested, if I disappear, if any accident befalls me or my family, they publish. You no longer have leverage, you have liabilities.
You taught me that every system has a pressure point. You were correct. Yours was your belief that you were the smartest person in every room. It made you blind. It made you explain your genius to me, in detail, for 7 years. You are not facing a scandal. You are facing a story. And I have given everyone the ending. The document ended. No threats, no gloating. A clinical post-mortem. A hollow laugh escaped him, bouncing off the glass walls. He had been outmaneuvered not by a grand strategy, but by 1,000 tiny, perfect efficiencies, the very thing he had prized her for. She had used his own language, his own tools, his own ruthless logic, and turned it into a cage. The press conference played on the muted wall screen. The DA, a Sternholman he'd once dismissed as a political lightweight, stood at a podium. Graphics flashed on a screen beside her. Timelines, email excerpts, voice waveform analyses. The narrative was clear, compelling, damning. He saw the story Ava had crafted, not of a complex financier, but of a predator in a suit. The silhouette of the powerful man behind the DA, blurred in the camera shots, was him. It was all him. And it was all her. Markov entered without knocking, his face grim. The building's security is being supplanted. Corporate is locking you out. They've changed the codes. My team's access is revoked. The mercenaries' loyalty, it seemed, ended with the direct deposit. There is a crowd forming downstairs. Media, protesters. It's not safe. Where is she? Julian asked, not looking away from the screen where his face now appeared, a stock photo that looked like a mugshot already. Gone. Disappeared into the stream. She was a ghost, Julian. We built her that way. The perfect assistant leaves no trace. Markov shifted his weight. My advice? Use the service elevator. There's a car 2 blocks over. You have maybe 6 hours before they freeze your passports. Advice? From an employee? The hierarchy was not just broken, it was inverted. He didn't take the service elevator. He walked through the main lobby, a perverse final act of ownership. The glass doors hissed open. The sound hit him first, a wall of shouting, the whir and click of cameras, the chaotic energy of a feeding frenzy. Microphones were thrust like spears towards his face. Lights bleached the world into a stark, high-contrast nightmare. In the sea of furious, screaming faces, he saw none of them. He saw only the calm, intense expression from her office, the raised chin, the eyes that held the truth, and the patience to wait. A reporter broke through the cordon, shoving a recorder at his chest. Mr. Thorne, do you have any response to the allegations? Do you deny the existence of the Omega file? Julian Thorne stopped. He looked at the recorder, then passed it into the lens of a live feed camera.
For a lifetime, he had crafted messages, manipulated narratives, spoken words that moved billions. Now, he had nothing to say that wouldn't be a fragment of the story she had already written. Any denial would be the frantic footnote, any defense the proof of guilt. He had built an empire on being the loudest voice in the room. Now his silence was the only thing that was truly his. He turned, letting the silence speak for him, and pushed through the gauntlet towards the anonymous car. The narrative was complete. The market had closed. He was liquidated. 500 miles away, in a quiet cottage overlooking a different, smaller body of water, Ava Silva sat on a porch swing. The morning was cool, the air smelling of pine and damp earth. A tablet rested on her lap, the live news feed showing a silent, shattered man fighting his way through a crowd. She watched for a moment, then closed the browser. She picked up her own phone, a new one, prepaid. She dialed a number from memory. It was answered on the second ring. Ramirez Mill and Family Trust, Maria speaking. Maria, it's Ava. The voice on the other end warmed instantly, relief and worry mingling. Mija, are you safe? I saw the news. It's everywhere. That man. I'm safe, Ava said, and for the first time in 7 years, she felt the truth of it settle into her bones. It's over. The pensions are reinstated. The buyout offer is void. The mill is yours. The legal fund I set up will cover any lingering battles, but I don't think there will be any. Thorn Capital has bigger problems. A long pause, then a soft sob. I don't know how to thank you. Your father, He'd tell me I finally finished that business degree, Ava said, a real smile touching her lips for the first time in what felt like centuries. Her father, the union man, the storyteller at the kitchen table, who taught her power wasn't in the shout, but in the story that outlived it. They talked for a few more minutes about mundane things, about her mother's health, about the new line of organic cotton the mill was exploring. Normal life. The fabric rewoven. After hanging up, Ava looked out at the lake, its surface smooth as glass. The quiet was different here. It wasn't the pressurized silence of the penthouse, waiting to be broken by a demand. It was a silence that belonged to her. She had spoken. She had used the voice she had honed in boardrooms, the patience she had learned from watching ecosystems of greed, the precision she had mastered from managing a tyrant's life. She had told the true story, and in doing so, had reclaimed her own. Julian Thorne thought she was part of the background. He was wrong. She was the frame, and when she stepped out of it, his entire picture collapsed. She took a deep breath, the clean air a balm. The work was not done. There were other threads, other small, arrogant men pulling at the fabric of decent lives. She had resources now, hidden, layered, untraceable. She had a formidable skill set, and she had a new story to write. The title was simple, What Comes After the Fall, and the first line was hers. The world, for Julian Thorne, became a study in negative space. The roar of adulation was gone, replaced by a low, constant hum of legal dread. The deference of headwaiters and bankers was gone, replaced by the bored, procedural indifference of bailiffs and court clerks. His name, once a byword for power, was now a toxic asset. Thorn Capital was being dismantled, its profitable organs sold off to pay fines and settlements, its carcass picked over by scavenger funds. He was not a titan anymore. He was a case number.
He lived in a rented apartment, the kind paid for by his last loyal lawyer from an escrow account that hadn't yet been seized. It had white walls and generic furniture and a view of an air shaft. The silence here was the worst kind. It wasn't the strategic quiet of the penthouse. It was an empty, echoing silence that amplified the replay in his head. Every night, the same footage. Ava's calm face. You were done. His legal strategy, crafted by a demoralized and overbilled team, was one of containment. Admit to the financial malfeasance, the technical violations, the things the Omega file proved beyond a doubt. Portray it as the aggressive but regrettable overreach of a visionary, a sin of ambition, not malice.
fight like hell against the RICO charges, the human toll, distance the man from the machine. It was a rearguard action, a fighting retreat into a prison of fewer years. He was prepping for a deposition, highlighting sections of a prospectus, when he saw it. A footnote. A tiny, seemingly innocuous investment in a biomedical startup 3 years prior. Silent Heart Innovations. He'd approved it on a half sheet of paper Ava had placed before him during a call about a much larger deal in Hong Kong. Promising oncology research, tax efficient, her neat script had read. He'd scrawled his initials. Now, with the hyper-focused clarity of a condemned man, he stared at the name. A cold finger traced his spine. Oncology. Cancer research. Her mother's emphysema, but what about before that? He racked his memory, a vault now forced open. Fragments surfaced. A week Ava had taken off years ago. Family emergency, the out-of-office reply had said. A conversation overheard, her voice hushed and strained in the break room, words like biomarkers and treatment protocols. With a frantic energy he hadn't felt since the fall, he began to dig. He used a burner laptop, hopping through proxy servers, a ghost in the machine he once owned. Public medical research databases, obituary archives, patent filings. He was no detective, but he was a world-class miner of obscure data. He found it in an old local newspaper's social section, a community fundraiser for a beloved teacher, Leona Silva, in her fight against pancreatic cancer. The date was 8 years ago. The survivor listed, her daughter, Ava. Leona Silva had died 6 months later, and Silent Heart Innovations had been, according to a dry scientific abstract he barely understood, a pioneer in a novel, highly targeted gene editing therapy for pancreatic cancer, a therapy that had failed its phase 2 trials spectacularly due to unforeseen autoimmune complications. The lead investor who had pulled the plug, triggering the company's collapse and the end of its research, a shell subsidiary wholly owned by Thorn Capital's Venture D Fund, a fund he let his deputies run, a fund whose quarterly loss summaries Ava would have compiled. The realization didn't hit him like a thunderbolt. It seeped in, cold and deep, like groundwater rising to drown him. It wasn't just the mill. It wasn't just a pension. The thread he had pulled started years earlier. He had completely unknowingly, indirectly, from 30,000 feet, killed the program that might have saved her mother's life. And Ava, in her meticulous, all-seeing way, would have known. She would have seen the investment, tracked the research, and connected the corporate decision to the personal outcome. This changed everything. This wasn't the cold revenge of a principled whistleblower. This was a blood feud. This was a daughter's wrath, patient and absolute. The Omega file wasn't just justice, it was an offering on a grave. His defense strategy, his narrative of aggressive business practices, crumbled to dust in the face of this motive. If this got out, a scorned daughter destroying an empire over her mother's death, the jury would understand it. They might even sympathize. But for him, it would be the end. It would make him not just a criminal, but a monster in a human tragedy. He'd never get out. He had to see her. Finding her was ironically easier than he expected. She wasn't hiding in the deep, paranoid way he would have. She had simply moved on. He used the last of his dwindling favors with a private investigator who still owed him. The report came back in 48 hours. A cottage in the Pacific Northwest. Quiet. Paid for in cash through a trust. No digital footprint to speak of. She was living like a person who had said what she needed to say. He didn't call. He didn't announce himself. He just went. He drove a rented sedan for hours, the lush green blurring past the windows, a landscape utterly alien to his former life. He found the cottage at the end of a gravel lane, shrouded in tall firs. It was modest, beautiful in a way that felt like a rebuke. She was in the garden, not a decorative one, but a real one. Raised beds with neat rows of vegetables, the earth dark and damp. She was kneeling, wearing simple work clothes, her hands buried in the soil, pulling weeds.
She didn't look up as his car crunched to a halt. She just kept working. He got out, the door sounding obscenely loud in the quiet. He stood by the car, feeling foolish in his expensive but rumpled shirt and plaques, a costume from a closed play. He cleared his throat. Ava. She finished placing a weed in a basket, wiped her hands on her thighs, and stood. She turned to face him. There was no surprise, no fear, no anger, just a deep, assessing calm. She looked healthier. The sharp, professional edge was softened, but the intensity in her eyes was unchanged, magnified by the clear air. "Julian," she said. It was just his name, not Mr. Thorne, not an accusation, a simple identifier for a thing that had arrived in her space. "I know," he said, the words raspy, "about Silent Heart, about your mother." She didn't flinch. She just watched him, waiting. "It changes nothing," he blurted, the legal mind seizing control. "In the eyes of the law, it's irrelevant. It's motive, not evidence. It just makes you look personal, vindictive. It undermines your credibility as a truth teller." A slight, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. Not warm, amused. "You drove all this way to tell me my motive is bad for my brand?" "I came to tell you—" He struggled, the prepared speech evaporating. "I didn't know about the connection. I would never have—" "Would never have what?" asked Ava, gently, almost curious. "Would never have invested in a promising biotech, or would never have pulled the funding when the risk profile changed? Which part of the equation would you have altered, Julian? Be specific." He opened his mouth, but no sound came. He saw the trap. Any answer confessed to a flaw in his perfect, impersonal system. "You wouldn't have changed a thing," she said for him, answering her own question. "Because it wasn't personal. It was business. That's what you always said. That's what you believed." She took a step closer, not threateningly, but like a teacher approaching a slow student. "That's the point. You live in a world where business is a magic word that dissolves consequence, where a pension fund is a liability, where a life-saving research program is a line item. My motive isn't a secret, Julian. It's the thesis. I didn't bring you down because you hurt me. I brought you down because your system is a machine that grinds up human beings and calls it profit. I just had a front row seat to the grinding." The cool, logical fury of it winded him more than any shout could have. He had come here hoping for a crack, for the human emotion of revenge that he could exploit. He found instead a colder, more formidable architecture, a moral calculus. "They'll use it against you," he insisted, a last weak gambit. "Let them," she shrugged, a small, dismissive movement. "The story isn't about my mother, Julian. It's about the Ramirez mill and the poisoned water in Dalton and the rigged bids in Lagos. My mother's story is just the one that proves I know what I'm talking about. It proves I've seen the cost." She looked at him, her gaze stripping him bare. "You came here hoping for leverage. You have none. The only thing you found was the why you were too blind to ask for. Does it help? Knowing?" He stood there, amidst the scent of damp earth and growing things, in the domain of the woman he had broken and who had, in turn, shattered his world. He had thought the worst was the loss of money, power, freedom. He was wrong. The worst was this: understanding. Seeing the intricate, devastating chain of cause and effect that led from his chair to her garden. He was not an untouchable force of nature. He was a man who had made choices, and the choices had a name and a face and a memory. He had no answer for her, no deal to propose, no threat to make. The silence stretched, filled only by the whisper of the wind in the firs. Finally, he turned, the gravel crunching under his shoes again, a retreating rhythm. He got in the car. He didn't look back as he drove away. In the rearview mirror, the last he saw of her was a figure already returned to her knees, hands back in the soil, weeding, planting, tending to a world she could actually touch. He drove towards the coming storm of his trial, armed now with the full, horrible truth. He was not a fallen king.
He was an answered question, a proven theorem, and the verdict, when it came, would just be a formality. She had already delivered the judgment, in a quiet voice, in a garden, with 2 words that now held the weight of a world. He was done.